Welcome back to another edition of the Course Creation Incubator Podcast. I'm your host, Gina Onativia, here to get you excited about your course creation and your marketing to help you build the course-based business of your dreams. And if you've been listening to me and listening to this podcast, you know I like to reminisce about the old days sometimes, way back when Tony Robbins, the big guy, used to be my boss and I was his creative manager. In addition to creating a lot of different products for Tony, I also got to go into the studio with him, which was so invaluable in terms of learning how things work. And he had a studio in Sun Valley, Utah. Beautiful house. You went up this long dirt driveway to get there. Just an incredible view. And I loved going to that house. And I'll never forget that one day, this is the first day actually, we were in the studio for a product called Ultimate Edge. And Tony said that, oh, let's break for lunch soon because he was getting a little hungry. And I offered him some nuts because I had a packet of trail mix in my bag. So I'm like thinking, hey, Tony, would you like some nuts right now? And the producer looks at me like I'm crazy. And he's like, he can't eat nuts right now. He will not be able to deliver any audio. Think about it. And I felt so silly. And here I am. I'm young, right? I'm just trying to figure things out in terms of how do you kind of act and behave in the studio. And from then on out, I never brought a darn bag of trail mix into the studio ever again. So I love going to the house and learning and recording. And I knew it was all a recording process. And today I can laugh about that story. At the time, I was absolutely horrified. And part of what I did for Tony was I would outline before he would go into the studio. I'd outline those scripts, his workshops, his events, his different programs. And that's where I really learned the structure overall of how to present your material, how to present your content. And I've taken that structure and framework everywhere I go, including courses, when I plan events, when I plan workshops, when I plan my talks. A lot of you have been reaching out and saying, you know, Gina, I don't quite have a course inside of me yet, or one that I'm ready to release. However, I am ready for a 1 hour workshop. So I thought, okay, this is kind of cool. Like, what if we talk through how to create that 1 hour workshop so you can test the waters, you can validate your price point, you can validate your content a little bit, and you can grow confident in terms of putting out your content, figure out what you're teaching, how you're teaching it, just getting your feet wet a little bit in terms of putting out a smaller offer. So during this podcast, I thought I would do a workshop about how to break down your 1 hour workshop and how to teach that in a really effective and great way, just like I learned when I worked for Tony Robbins. And by the way, Tony is also where I met my husband, where I met Alex, who I talk about all the time as well. So I have Tony to thank for hiring Alex as a contract graphic designer. So I found a lot of love there. I found a lot of knowledge. So just overall, a great experience. Okay. Before I dive into the meat of this episode, I want to remind you that this episode is brought to you by my online course Jumpstart. If you have been wondering where to get started in terms of your best-selling course, what are the questions to ask? What are the steps? Check out my online course Jumpstart video series. It is a great program. It is only $27 and it will set you on the path to a best-selling course. Okay, I'll link to that in the show notes, coursecreationboutique.com/jumpstart program. All right, now on to our 1 hour workshop. So step one is, what's your outcome? My favorite question of all time, right? What is your outcome with this workshop? Because it's only 1 hour, right? So it's got to be tight enough to deliver on that outcome. So as part of this step, I want you to think about your topic and your audience, why you're doing this for your audience and why you're doing this overall for your business as well. You have to know your outcome so you can focus on what you want to deliver. So say I was doing, for example, a list building workshop for an hour. I mean, I could teach all week, I could teach all month about list building, right? So this is why it's so important to really drill down on these different elements in terms of your outcome, because I know I have 1 hour. So what if I focused on, for that list building workshop, how to create your high converting lead magnet. By the way, this 1 hour workshop about list building and that high converting lead magnet, this actually comes from real life. I used to do retreats and I would pull in my partner in crime, Megan O'Leary. I would fly Megan in for 2 days and we would teach course creators how to build their courses over 2 days and how to market as well. And one of the areas that we really honed in on was your lead magnet and how to create it, how to choose it, and how to break it down. So let's use this as an example. It's a 1 hour session teaching you how to structure and start to write your lead magnet and just kind of figure out your overall list building campaign. I know I can teach that in an hour. And my outcome is to get them started in list building because I know I have, let's say, a fictional program about list building that I want to sell at the end of this workshop. So it's a tight, nice outcome. I know what I'm teaching. I know where I'm trying to send them. I know their next steps. So that's step one. I want you all baked into that in terms of your outcome. I want you knowing your audience, your topic, where you're going to send them, why you're doing this for your business. Okay. So that is a nice, great outcome. I know what I'm teaching. I know where I'm sending them. I know their next steps. And I know my audience. So let's make an assumption here. I'm going to help mompreneurs who are just starting out in terms of their course creation. So I've got that nice niche that I'm going to focus on for this specific 1 hour workshop. And maybe I've gotten a lot of requests for list building, and this is the demand that I'm fulfilling on. So I'll link to some helpful episodes in the show notes, by the way. If you're thinking, Gina, I'm not quite sure I know all about my audience, I'll do a couple of links in the show notes for you to check out to help you out. Then step two, what are the overall chunks that I need to teach in order to get the outcome? Now, I've already said a few of these chunks as part of step one, and now I'm going to organize them as part of step two. So first and foremost, I want to have an introduction. I've got a little bit behind the lead magnet, the list building. Then I'm going to go into my core pieces of how I want it to flow. So now I'm going to go into breaking down a lead magnet, the best topics, the best type of lead magnets. And I'm only going to give them a few examples because I have an hour, right? I don't have hours to teach this. All right, so I'm not quite sure how many chunks that is. I think it's 6 or 7 or 8, but those are the ones that I want to cover. And you're all going to have pretty much the same kind of rhythm and same kind of cadence of chunks. So think about it. It's the intro, the why behind what you're teaching, the core of what you're teaching, something you're assigning them to do, optional shares, and then an optional Q&A, and then a call to action taking the next step with you. Okay, so I've already figured out my chunks as part of step 2. Then in step 3, you want to start to fill in the detail. Now that you have the overarching picture of the buckets or kind of the framework that you are working with. So here's the great thing about a live workshop, though. You do not need to fill in every single line in detail. You just need to have an idea of what you want to teach. Okay, now you're ready for step 3, where you're going to fill in the detail, because with step 2, you have your overarching pieces, your overarching framework. Now with step 3, you're going to start to fill it in, okay, and those details and that content that you want to teach. And here's the great thing about going live. You don't need to figure out every single word you're going to say. You don't need to script it word for word. You can have a rough outline of what you want to present. And by the way, for the intro, our first chunk, I want you to tell a story. So I come from the School of Bo Eason, and I had his wife Dawn on as part of the podcast. I'll link to that in the show notes about how to really show up when you're presenting. And when you are from the School of Bo Eason, you start with the story. And I want you to start with the story because it makes you relatable. It allows you to instantly connect with your person. So think about what short story instantly connects you with your students, okay? Think about a short story that makes it personal, that makes it universal for them to instantly know what you're about and shows off maybe a little bit of your expertise. So a great story for my list building example is maybe how I was reluctant to list build at first because I kept telling myself I was too boutique. I mean, come on, what kind of lame excuse is that? So I make it a funny little story. I tell like a 90-second, a 2-minute story before I launch into the other pieces of my workshop. Then I give them the why, I give them the benefits. I really reinforce why they're there at the workshop. Okay. And really make sure that you're reiterating their decision to be there and really emphasizing the benefits of list building in my case, or whatever you're teaching. Then you're going to launch into your core content. And this is the meat. This is the goods. Okay. And I talk about this in my posted exercise process. I'll link to that in the show notes, where you want to have 5 steps. You want to have your overarching pieces of what you're trying to teach them for that workshop. Then, if you want, you're going to make it interactive. I do suggest you make it interactive and dynamic. They're going to work on it themselves. You've taught them the concept. They need to then know how they're going to work on it and do it live, so you can give them feedback so it really feels like a workshop. I love teaching live, by the way, because you can see the expressions that happen when you're teaching your content. You could see what's lighting people up, what's confusing them. And then, speaking of doing your workshop live, I like doing the Q&A because you can get a lot of clarity from your students in terms of what they understand and what they don't get. So I'm always listening to see what was I unclear on, or what holes did I leave for my students that I need to revise or fill for the next time I do that workshop. Or maybe I do a full-blown course and I really need to figure out this piece of content because I left my students confused. So use the Q&A, make sure that you're getting clarity and feedback about that content you're putting forth, and making sure that you are being clear. Okay, as a final step, step 4, let's talk about your call to action, the next step after this workshop. So I would love for you to have a call to action. Some of you may feel unclear or may not quite know what your next step is. To the best of your ability, I would love for you to have that next step. I have this client who's having a few trainings. This is in the last couple of months, and he just wanted to try things on, but he didn't have a clear next step. I feel like you lose a little bit of momentum when you do that, when you aren't clear about what your next step is with your student. Okay, here are a couple of call to actions. You could have a wait list. You could have somebody sign up for your program, your group coaching. You could have another workshop at the ready. You could have a challenge or a paid challenge, a subscription. Whatever it is, it's the next paid offer for your workshop students. And by the way, this workshop doesn't have to be 60 minutes. It could be 90 minutes. Some of you might want a higher price point, so you do a 2-hour workshop. By the way, some of you might say, Gina, I need more time. 60 minutes is not going to cut it. So go 90 minutes, go 2.5 hours. Or some of you might say, well, I have a higher price point that I want to sell off of the workshop, so I need more time. Go for it. Okay, you have my permission. You have the freedom to increase the time for the workshop. And by the way, if you're a coach and you don't have a course yet, you could enroll people into your coaching program, or if your one-on-one spots are full, you could use this workshop to launch your group coaching program. You don't necessarily have to create a course or create more content. This could also work for those of you starting out. Coaching can be a great way to test out your audience and your course ideas. And by the way, I just talked about coaching with Annette Oran last episode, so I'll link to that in the show notes as well if you're thinking about getting your coaching practice going. All right, let's recap those steps real quick. Step 1, think through your outcome, your topic, why you're doing this, your audience, what do they really need. Step 2, what's your chunks, your overall framework. Step 3 is to start to fill in that detail. Think about the story you want to tell and the stories and examples throughout. Step 4, what's your call to action and what you're going to be selling into. All right, hopefully this was beneficial for you. You're on your way to creating your workshop. Please drop me a line at Course Creation Boutique. Let me know how you are building your own 1-hour workshop. Leave me a review if this has impacted your life or your business. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss one other workshop episode. And then if you want to get on the road to a best-selling course, check out my online course, Jumpstart. Until next week, go create, be you and be brilliant, and get it done.